Dawn seeped through paper screens as incense curled and the hall held its breath. The teacher said, "A beloved disciple has lost the path," and the floor seemed to tilt. The seeker stared at the tatami, feeling the words strike like stones in a pond. The fellow disciple said, "Who could it be?" Yet her eyes grazed him, quiet and afraid. The teacher said, "The one who clutches progress like a sword cuts only himself." The seeker said, "I meditate, I serve, I obey," while a tremor pulsed beneath his ribs. The silent witness watched, unmoving, his stillness louder than any bell. A maple leaf spun in from the veranda, red as shame in gray dawn. The teacher said, "Attachment is the thief," and the hall answered with a bruised hush. The seeker said, "Am I the one?" And the question cracked a shell behind his eyes. The teacher said, "You already know," and his gaze opened a door the seeker feared. Fellow disciple breathed. "Stay," and the leaf landed, a soft period on the floor. The seeker felt that landing inside him, a small death tasting of metal and rain. The skeptic lingered beyond the threshold, silent, as if certainty were a trick of light. The hall emptied, but the seeker's chest still rang like bronze after a strike. The fellow disciple walked beside him under the eaves, and rain began its quiet grammar. Fellow disciple said, "Let the words pass through you." The seeker said, "They cut instead." He watched a gutter stream gather leaves and carry them away, and envy rose like steam. The teacher's sentence repeated until it lost meaning, and then returned sharper. The seeker said, "If effort is a blade, what remains when I set it down?" The fellow disciple said, "Hands." He looked at his hands, calloused from sweeping, and felt them useless as clouds. The silent witness crossed the courtyard with steady steps, and the rain bowed off his shoulders. The seeker said, "I thought I was close, and the admission tasted raw." The fellow disciple said, "Close as a wall when you lean on it." A bellbird called from the cedars, and the sound entered him like mercy. He did not feel saved, only seen by something that asked nothing at all. The seeker knelt in his cell, knees on straw, breath counting against the ticking leak. He tried to follow the rise and fall, but a hook pulled at each inhale. The skeptic whispered through the shoji, "So holiness hiccups too." The seeker said, "Leave me." The skeptic said, "You wanted praise dressed as peace." He flinched as if struck, because the shape of it fit. The skeptic said, "If there is no prize, will you still sit?" The seeker said, "I do not know." He listened to the leak, and heard his own want drip after it. The fellow disciple tapped twice at the frame, and left a bowl of tea. Steam unscrolled into the dim like a small blessing, without a sermon. The seeker said, "If I drink, I fail. If I refuse, I posture," and his laugh broke. The leak answered without judgment. He set the cup before him, and bowed to nothing in particular. Summoned back to the hall, the seeker faced the teacher and the scent of pine resin. The teacher placed a stone on the floor and said, "Carry this without hands." The seeker said, "With the mind?" The teacher said, "With what carries the mind." The request felt like thunder wrapped in silk. Fellow disciple stood aside, eyes warm, as if to say, "Try failing." The seeker said, "I cannot even hold my breath without wanting to be praised for drowning." The teacher's mouth hinted at a smile that refused to be born. The silent witness looked at the stone, as if it were the sky. The skeptic said, "A trick is still a trick," and the teacher did not turn. The seeker knelt, bowed to the stone, and felt foolish and free for half a heartbeat. The teacher said, "Attend to the one who bows." The words opened a small window, and a cold wind touched his face. He realized the room had not changed, only the weight he was naming. Night gathered like a shawl, and the crickets tuned the dark into a single low note. The seeker walked the garden paths where lanterns made islands on the gravel. He said, "If I am the lost one, let me be lost fully," and the air took the vow. The fellow disciple joined him in silence, and matched his steps. The fellow disciple said, "When the lantern ends, keep walking," and her smile was a bare thread. The seeker said, "I want an answer that does not ask me back." The wind said nothing, and taught better. The teacher's words replayed, but their edges dulled in the open night. The silent witness paused on a bridge and inclined his head like a moon. The skeptic watched from the gate, arms folded, eyes less certain than before. The seeker stopped, closed his eyes, and felt the gravel through the thin soles. He said, "Here, not to claim, but to stop fleeing." For a moment the knight agreed, and his breath arrived where his feet were. The dawn bell echoed, yet the seeker's chest felt hollow, as though the sound struck only walls inside him. He knelt before his cushion, spine rigid, but his breath faltered, rising like smoke and then collapsing into ash. The teacher's riddle haunted him, carry without hands. Each inhale brought the stone back into his lap, heavy and unyielding. The seeker said, "If I cannot still my mind, then what is the worth of my hours here?" His words fell into the silence like pebbles in a dry well. The low disciple passed the doorway, pausing, her eyes kind but steady, and said, "Worth is not yours to measure." The seeker's jaw tightened, because the truth pressed harder than comfort. He whispered, "I am lost before I rise." The leak in the roof kept counting, and he felt each drop carve deeper into his will. Even the incense seemed to avoid him, its threads curling toward corners. Shame and exhaustion wrapped him like damp robes, and he could not breathe them off. Later, in the courtyard, the seeker swept fallen needles into uneven piles. Each stroke of the broom seemed to accuse him of distraction, each bristle catching on stone. The skeptic leaned against the veranda post, arms crossed, eyes sharp. The skeptic said, "You chase emptiness like a fool chasing smoke." The seeker pressed harder with the broom until twigs snapped beneath the strain. He said, "If I let go, I fall apart." The skeptic laughed, the sound brittle as dry wood. The fellow disciple approached with a jug of water, offering a cup. She said, "Drink, not because it fixes but because it fills." The seeker took the cup, fingers trembling, water sloshing over the rim. He felt the wetness seep into his robe, like a confession. He said, "Every act feels like failure." The teacher passed silently across the garden, his shadow long in the afternoon light, leaving no words, only presence. The seeker lowered his head, ashamed to crave even a glance. Inside the refectory, bowls clinked softly as disciples ate in silence. The seeker stared at his rice, each grain a mountain he could not climb. His hand shook, spilling broth, and he winced as though pierced. The silent witness, seated nearby, lifted his chopsticks with grace, not hurried, not slow, only present. The seeker said under breath, "How can he sit like stone and still feel alive?" The skeptic, overhearing, leaned closer and said, "Perhaps he feels nothing at all." The fellow disciple said, "Or perhaps he feels more than you dare." The seeker felt heat rise in his cheeks, shame mixing with hunger. He said, "Every bite tastes of failure." The teacher at the head lifted his spoon once and set it down, eyes never leaving the seeker. That gaze landed heavier than any blow. The seeker bowed, trembling, and his rice remained untouched, as though eating would betray the weight pressing his chest. Evening brought the meditation circle, a ring of disciples around the hall. The seeker sat among them, heart hammering, breath ragged. The teacher said, "Attend to the breath as though it is the last you are given." The words struck him like a hammer. He closed his eyes, but within he saw storms, regrets, the face of the shadows smiling through memories. He clenched fists, nails cutting his palms. The fellow disciple said softly, "Let it pass." The seeker shouted inwardly, "I cannot," and his shoulders trembled. The skeptic's smirk widened in the silence, a victory needing no words. The teacher's bell rang once, and the sound felt like a blade splitting him. The seeker said in his chest, "If I breathe, I drown. If I stop, I burn." Sweat traced down his back. The silent witness sat immovable, and in that stillness the seeker glimpsed a possibility beyond himself, just beyond reach, and it broke him further. Night deepened over the temple grounds, cicadas singing like restless thoughts. The seeker walked alone, gravel crunching beneath his sandals, each step heavy with doubt. He said, "Why do I remain if peace flees me?" The stars overhead burned with indifference. At the pond's edge, he knelt, staring at his reflection quivering with ripples. He whispered, "Who am I without praise, without progress?" The skeptic's laughter carried faint from the dormitory, sharp as broken glass. The seeker said, "If I leave, I betray. If I stay, I suffocate." His voice cracked, nearly swallowed by the night. The fellow disciple approached, carrying a lantern, and placed it on the shore. She said, "The water does not choose the moon, yet it reflects." The seeker's eyes stung, tears joining ripples. He said, "I am more shadow than light." The lantern flame bent in the breeze, but did not go out, and he felt its fragile persistence mirror something still alive within him. Morning fog wrapped the meditation hall as the teacher set a challenge: sit until the bell calls without moving. The seeker settled cross-legged, bones already aching. He said inwardly, "I will endure," though the thought tasted of iron. Minutes stretched until they fractured, each second swelling into torment. His breath stuttered, shoulders twitching despite his will. The teacher's eyes were closed, yet the seeker felt pierced as if the silence itself accused him. The skeptic leaned against the far wall, smirking, arms folded, whispering, "You last less than the cicadas." Shame sharpened his trembling. Fellow disciple sat steady nearby, her eyes soft as rain, but her stillness magnified his failure. The seeker's thighs burned, and sweat gathered beneath his robe. He thought, "If I move, I betray the path. If I break, I betray myself." The bell remained silent, time stretching without mercy. When his spine slumped, he heard his heart scold, and he gasped, caught between breaking and surrender. The bell finally rang, low and merciful, but the seeker's relief curdled into anger. He said, "Why prolong torment when peace is the teaching?" The teacher opened his eyes, gaze like stone. He said, "You seek peace as comfort, not truth." The words dug beneath his ribs. The seeker rose too fast, knees screaming, robe clinging with sweat. He said, "Am I a student or a prisoner?" His voice echoed against wood beams. The skeptic laughed, a brittle chorus saying, "At least one of you admits the cage." The fellow disciple reached toward him, palm open, whispering, "Breathe, not battle." But his fists curled, veins taut. The teacher said calmly, "You must break before you are whole." The seeker spat back, "Then I am only shards." His words scattered like glass across the hall. Silence followed, thicker than incense smoke. The silent witness shifted his gaze once toward the seeker, a mirror without judgment, and the seeker felt pierced by the absence of blame. Later, assigned to rake the gravel garden, the seeker dragged the tool in harsh strokes, lines jagged and broken. He said, "Even sand resists me." His breath hissed like an angry flute. The skeptic perched on a stone, arms crossed, saying, "The world resists fools who think it should bow." The seeker thrust harder, scattering patterns into chaos. A fellow disciple approached, kneeling to smooth a section with her palm. She said, "Peace is drawn, not forced." He watched the lines form beneath her touch, simple and unstrained, and felt fury rise at her ease. He said, "Your calm mocks me." She said, "Your anger mocks you." Her words hit like quiet thunder. The teacher, passing beyond the gate, did not stop, his presence alone deepening the sting. The seeker dropped the rake, chest heaving, sweat streaking his face. He whispered, "The garden mirrors my ruin." His voice cracked like the broken lines behind him, a map of a soul unraveling. At dusk, the seeker was tasked with carrying water buckets up stone steps. The weight dragged his arms down, shoulders quaking. He said, "Each drop is heavier than truth." The skeptic followed behind, taunting, "You cannot even carry water, how will you carry wisdom?" His teeth clenched, jaw aching. Halfway up, he stumbled, spilling water across mossy stones. He cursed under his breath, fists trembling. The fellow disciple, carrying her own bucket steady, passed him gently, whispering, "Water returns where it belongs." Her words burned both comfort and wound. He stared at her back, anger sparking against admiration. The teacher stood at the top of the steps, hands folded, silent as the sky, gaze unreadable. The seeker said, "I cannot reach you," breath breaking. His knees struck stone, water dripping through his robe. The skeptic said, "Prove then that this path is not just vanity." His body shook between despair and rage, caught in the gravity of failure. Night returned, restless crickets singing, but the seeker could not sleep. He paced his narrow cell, shadow jagged against the paper wall. He said, "Every effort ends in ruin." His fists struck the wood frame, rattling it. The skeptic's voice drifted outside, cold. "Maybe you are not meant for truth." The seeker shouted, "Then why does it burn inside me?" His breath came ragged, chest caving. He collapsed onto the mat, forehead against straw, whispering, "Teacher, why give me tasks to fail?" His voice cracked, unanswered. Fellow disciple slid a folded cloth under the door, silent offering. He lifted it with shaking hands, tears falling into the fabric. The teacher's words echoed in memory, "You must break before you are whole." The silent witness passed the corridor window, gaze still and infinite. The seeker said, "If breaking is the path, I am already dust." He clutched the cloth, torn between despair and a desperate hunger to endure. Storm clouds gathered above the temple, wind scattering leaves across the courtyard. The seeker stood alone, chest tight, when the catalyst appeared, a stranger in tattered blue robes. The catalyst said, "You grip the rope so hard your hands bleed, yet still you claim it is the rope that binds you." The seeker stared, words stolen by the gale. He said, "I have tried to let go, yet I remain chained." Catalyst laughed, sharp as thunder, and said, "You never held the rope at all." His gaze burned like lightning striking stone. The skeptic shouted from the veranda, "Another riddler for fools." The fellow disciple whispered, "Listen." The seeker's stomach twisted, because the words rang both absurd and piercing. The catalyst stepped closer, voice a whisper now, "What binds you is not the rope, but your love for the mark it leaves." Rain began to fall, heavy and cleansing. The seeker felt each drop strike like a question he had feared to ask. The storm deepened, lightning flaring against the mountains. The seeker ran to the hall, heart racing, but inside the shadow waited, a figure of memory. It wore his father's face, stern and silent, robes stained with ink and regret. The shadow said, "You failed me, and still you kneel before strangers." The seeker gasped, fists trembling, because the voice was his own echo. He said, "You are not real." Yet his chest ached with truth. The shadow stepped forward, smile like cracked glass. "If I am not real, why do you bleed each time I speak?" The skeptic's laughter drifted faintly outside, cutting deeper. The seeker shouted, "You are only my past." His voice cracked, swallowed by thunder. The shadow said, "Then why do I walk with you now?" The candlelight flickered, and his reflection fractured across the polished floor. The seeker knelt, tears burning, whispering, "How do I let you go if you are me?" The seeker fled to the veranda, rain soaking his robe, breath ragged. The teacher stood waiting, still and dry despite the storm, as though the world obeyed him. The seeker cried, "Master, I am breaking." The teacher's eyes pierced with calm. He said, "You are not breaking, you are discovering the pieces you have always been." The seeker shook his head, tears mixing with rain. "I cannot endure." The teacher said, "Then stop enduring. Let go of what clings to endurance." The skeptic barked a laugh behind him. "What nonsense!" Yet the words rooted deeper than the laughter. The low disciple placed a hand on his arm, steady as stone. The teacher whispered, "You believe your suffering is failure, but it is only the shadow of grasping." The seeker collapsed to his knees, sobbing, "Then my enemy is myself." The teacher said, "No, Only you're clinging to what you think you are. Lightning split the sky, illuminating his revelation. Night settled heavy, thunder fading, yet the seeker's chest felt more storm than sky. He sat in his cell, candle low, staring at the cloth folded in his lap. The silent witness entered quietly, sitting across without words. His gaze held oceans of stillness. The seeker whispered, "I am haunted by illusions, bound by shadows, mocked by doubt." His voice shook, but the witness did not move. The silence stretched until it felt unbearable. The seeker shouted, "Say something!" Yet only the flame answered, wavering. Then he saw it. The witness did not resist his cry, nor reject his storm. He simply was. Tears spilled, softer this time. The seeker said, "You teach without words." His chest eased for the first time in days. The cloth in his lap no longer felt like a burden, but a gift. He whispered, "Perhaps peace is not earned, but allowed." The witness inclined his head once, and the room exhaled with him. Before dawn the rain ceased, and mist rose from the temple garden. The seeker walked barefoot across the gravel, breath steady, though doubt lingered like smoke. The teacher waited by the pond, reflection rippling. He said, "You believed failure was your wound, but it was your teacher." The seeker bowed deeply, forehead to wet earth. He whispered, "Then I was never broken." The teacher said, "You only mistook your grasping for loss." The fellow disciple smiled faintly nearby, pride without pride. The skeptic stood further back, arms crossed, but his smirk faltered. The silent witness gazed into the pond, his stillness mirrored by water. The seeker lifted his head, rain-washed face shining in the dawn light. He said, "The rope was never real." His words carried no demand, only release. For the first time the teacher nodded, small and rare. The garden sighed with wind, and the seeker felt himself open like a gate, no longer locked. Midnight silence filled the meditation hall, broken only by the hum of cicadas beyond the screens. The seeker sat cross-legged, spine bent under invisible weight. His chest ached as if the world pressed down through every rib. He whispered, "I cannot hold this." The teacher sat across, unmoving, eyes closed, radiating stillness. The skeptic leaned in the shadows, arms crossed, a smirk faltering. The fellow disciple whispered, "Breathe." His breath caught, choking, and he cried, "I fail in every breath." The teacher opened his eyes, calm as stone. "Then let the breath fail," he said. The seeker collapsed forward, palms striking tatami, tears streaming, sobs racking his frame. His voice cracked. "I am nothing," the teacher said softly, "at last." The silent witness remained still, gaze deep as night. The seeker's tears slowed, and in that breaking, something inside loosened, as though his cage dissolved into the air itself. The seeker lay on the floor, body trembling, as though emptied of all strength. The teacher's voice cut through the silence. "What remains when nothing remains?" The seeker whispered, "Only breath." The teacher said, "And who breathes?" The question opened inside him like dawn breaking through stone. He gasped, breath flooding, but for the first time it felt weightless. The skeptic muttered, "Madness," yet his own voice shook. The fellow disciple's eyes glistened with quiet joy. The seeker said, "The one who breathes is not the one who clings." His tears flowed freely, but now each drop felt like release. The teacher inclined his head, rare approval gleaming in his eyes. The seeker pressed his forehead to the mat, whispering, "I surrender." The hall felt vast, air trembling, as if even the wood exhaled with him. The silent witness blinked once, the only sign of motion, and the seeker felt the blink inside him, as though the world breathed too. At dawn, pale light spilled through mist as the seeker walked barefoot into the garden. His robe clung damp from tears and sweat, but his steps were steady. He whispered, "I am no longer searching." The skeptic followed at a distance, eyes sharp yet softened. The fellow disciple walked beside him, silent, smile faint like morning wind. At the pond's edge, the seeker knelt, staring at ripples that no longer fractured him. He said, "Peace does not come from victory but from surrender." The teacher approached, standing tall above, saying, "You have found what was never hidden." The seeker bowed low, forehead brushing gravel, body trembling with relief. The skeptic muttered, "Perhaps there is more than emptiness." The silent witness stood by the bridge, gaze infinite, presence steady as stone. The garden exhaled mist and light, and the seeker felt himself dissolve into it, no longer separate but part of every ripple, every dawn. Later, the seeker returned to the meditation hall, this time carrying no burden. He sat upon the cushion, closing his eyes, breath steady as wind across grass. The teacher said, "Now, sit as though nothing is lacking." His heart no longer raced, it flowed with ease. The skeptic, leaning against the pillar, frowned yet said nothing. The fellow disciple whispered, "You are present." He smiled faintly, words unnecessary. The silent witness sat nearby, and the silence felt vast, not heavy. The seeker said inwardly, "I am no longer broken nor whole, I am only here." His breath moved without effort, the air no longer enemy, but ally. The teacher rang the bell once, and the sound echoed inside him, not as command but as harmony. He bowed low, whispering, "Thank you." The hall seemed brighter, though no lanterns had been lit, and the space within him matched the stillness of the room at last. Evening fell, lanterns glowing golden across the courtyard. The seeker stood before the teacher, bowing deeply. He said, "I feared breaking, yet only breaking revealed the truth." The teacher nodded, eyes soft. "Only when you emptied yourself could you be filled." The skeptic approached slowly, lips parted as though to speak, then remained silent. The fellow disciple smiled, placing a hand briefly on the seeker's arm, warmth shared without words. The silent witness stood in the shadows, gaze endless, as if holding all without effort. The seeker said quietly, "I sought peace as reward. Now I know peace's presence." The teacher lifted the lantern, flame steady against the night breeze. He said, "Your path is not ended, it has begun." The seeker closed his eyes, letting the words settle. He exhaled, the night air cool, and whispered, "Here." For the first time, the word carried no hunger, only stillness. Dawn opened like a quiet book, and the seeker swept the courtyard without urgency. His strokes were light, the broom whispering along gravel like a kind thought. The fellow disciples said, "Your hands remember." He smiled, and the smile did not ask for witness. The teacher passed by, and his nod felt like the weather, natural and unannounced. The seeker said, "I work, and work works me." The words tasted simple and clean. A breeze lifted cedar scent, and the bellbird threaded a note through the air. The skeptic watched from the eaves, arms uncrossed for once, as if a door in her chest had cracked. The seeker said, "I used to chase silence, now I stand where it lands." The teacher said, "Attend and be attended." The broom drew calm lines, and they stayed. The seeker exhaled, and the day met him without struggle. He felt the ground rise to meet his feet, and no part of him needed to arrive. By mid-morning, steam rose from tea like a small prayer. The seeker poured 2 cups and set one on the veranda rail. The skeptic approached, suspicious of the kindness that asked nothing. The seeker said, "Drink with me." She lifted the cup and watched the surface settle. The skeptic said, "Does surrender mean quitting?" He answered, "It means not fighting what has already happened." Wind stirred the garden, and lantern tassels clicked like beads. The fellow disciple joined them, placing a rice cake between cups. She said, "Sweetness needs no reason." The skeptic tasted and did not pretend to dislike it. The teacher paused at the steps, eyes warm but brief. He said, "Tea is the same whether praised or ignored." The seeker laughed softly, not at anyone, but at the way heat met his hands. The skeptic breathed out a held breath, and the day loosened another knot. The path to the upper gate climbed through pines where shade cooled the earth, The silent witness walked ahead, steps even, robe whispering. The seeker matched the pace without forcing rhythm. He said, I used to count breaths like coins. The witness did not answer, and the quiet felt like guidance. The seeker said, now breath counts me. Sun broke through branches and stitched gold along the path. The fellow disciple followed, letting needles crackle underfoot without apology. The skeptic trailed farther back, one hand grazing bark as if testing the world. The teacher appeared at the crest and simply waited. The seeker stopped before him and bowed because bowing arrived by itself. The teacher said nothing added, nothing removed. The words found no argument. Wind rose and fell, and the pause between those motions was wide enough to live in. In his cell, the seeker unfolded the cloth. The fellow disciple had once slipped under the door. He placed a small stone inside, then removed it, then placed it again, a gentle rehearsal of letting go. He said, I forgive you, and the room understood. He spoke to himself. The shadow hovered at the edge, still wearing the old stern face. The seeker said, you kept me safe when I was small. The shadow's mouth softened into almost human grief. The teacher's voice arrived from memory, steady as rain, carry without hands. He lifted the cloth empty and smiled. The shadow stepped closer and dissolved like breath on glass. The fellow disciple knocked once and did not enter. She said, tea later? He said, yes. The silent witness passed the window, and the moment left no residue. The seeker watched the cloth lie simple and clean, and no part of him needed it to be more. Twilight painted the garden in lavender and gold, and crickets tuned the evening. The seeker walked the raked patterns he once tore, feet soft, lines unbroken. The teacher waited by the bell, and did not lift the mallet. The fellow disciple stood by the bridge, her smile barely there and entirely true. The skeptic lingered at the gate, no smirk, just a question she did not fear. The silent witness faced the pond, shoulders easy. The seeker said, peace is not later. The teacher said, nor earlier. The seeker said, only here. And the word did not strain. Wind touched the lanterns and left them steady. A heron crossed the sky without hurry and without plan. The seeker bowed to the bell that did not sound, and the unstruck note filled him. He turned toward the path, ready to start again without leaving. Dawn thinned the mist over the temple as the seeker climbed the stone path. He felt the gravel accept his steps instead of judging them. The bell had not rung, yet the morning sounded complete. The fellow disciple joined him without announcement, matching his quiet pace. Fellow disciple said, your face has weather after rain. He laughed softly because no performance remained. The teacher waited near the gate and did not speak. The seeker bowed as naturally as exhaling. The teacher said, walk where you stand. The words landed like a feather that still knew gravity. The skeptic lingered under the pines, uncertain, yet closer than before. The seeker said, you may stand with us or apart, and both are allowed. The skeptic did not answer, but her arms stayed open at her sides. The silent witness appeared along the path, and the moment did not strain to hold him. He said, I am here, and the words did not reach forward or back. A heron rose from the pond, and his chest rose with it. The day began without him and with him, and the difference vanished. Mid-morning light warmed the veranda, and the seeker poured tea without ceremony. The skeptic sat opposite, eyes clear but wary of tenderness. The skeptic said, what if meaning is a trick we tell ourselves? The seeker said, then let the trick rest when it is tired. Steam climbed like a word that refused argument. The skeptic said, I built my life on winning. He answered, and now you may build on breathing. The fellow disciple placed rice cakes between them and left with a nod. The skeptic said, if there is no prize, why try? He said, because trying happens, and when it stops, being remains. Wind moved the tassels and stilled them again. The teacher passed below the steps and did not disrupt their quiet. The skeptic said, I am afraid of emptiness. He said, "Stay until emptiness is not empty." Her shoulders lowered as if a gate unlatched. The tea cooled, and nothing was missing. The hallway smelled of cedar and sun as the fellow disciple paused with him. She traced a scar near her wrist and did not hide it. The fellow disciple said, "I thought peace meant never aching again." He said, "I thought it meant applause." A swallow darted past the open screen and stitched the moment. She said, "I still wake some nights and cannot find the shore." He answered, "Then you float until the shore finds you." The shadow flickered in a memory and did not take shape. She breathed and let the breath be enough. The seeker said, "Your calm taught me to dislike my storm, not to listen." She smiled at the correction and bowed her head. The teacher's bell sounded once, and no one hurried. The silent witness walked by, gaze soft as ever, and the hall settled. The fellow disciple said, "We keep walking," and he said, "We keep arriving." The words felt like sandals that finally fit. Afternoon gathered on the bell platform, where wind tasted of metal and pine. The silent witness stood beside the seeker, hands loose, attention steady. The seeker said, "Thank you for not mending me." The witness did not speak, and gratitude did not need shape. He closed his eyes and felt the bell's silence crowd the air without weight. The teacher appeared at the far edge and paused, approving nothing, refusing nothing. The seeker said, "I will forget and remember," and both are allowed. The wind bowed and rose again. The skeptic watched from the steps, her face unarmed. The fellow disciple leaned on the rail, smile threadlight. He opened his eyes, and the world arrived, uncluttered. He said, "I can hear the unstruck note." No one argued, and no one needed to. The moment held like water that chose not to spill, and he did not try to drink it dry. Sunset poured amber across the ridge, and the valley breathed like a sleeping animal. The seeker stood at the overlook where he once came to bargain. He did not bargain now. The teacher waited a few paces back, giving the horizon room. The fellow disciple's presence steadied the wind. The skeptic stood near, eyes wet and unashamed of it. The silent witness faced the light, and nothing in him strained. The seeker said, "I am not lost. I am here." The words lay down and did not demand work. A bellbird called, and the call did not point beyond itself. The teacher said, "Go on walking." He nodded, and the path felt level under every uncertainty. Distant smoke rose from a village roof and curled into evening. He took a breath that belonged to no one, and it answered. The valley kept being valley, and he kept being here, and no part of him needed more.